Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Starting his own artificial intelligence company.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. Legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Welcome to Elon Inc., where we discuss Elon Musk's vast corporate empire, his latest gambits and antics, and how to make sense of it all. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. The news is coming fast and furious in the Elon-verse. Last night, Elon announced that Neuralink had successfully implanted a chip into a human. Big news clearly, but just how excited or terrified should we be? Meanwhile, over at X, the team had a strange response to deepfake porn images of Taylor Swift that had gone viral on the platform. They made it impossible to search for her at all. Oh, and Tesla earnings came and went, and the stock market gave Elon a big thumbs down. To talk about this, I'm sitting here in the studio with Max Chafkin, senior reporter at Bloomberg Business Week. Hello, Max.
Hey.
You missed me, Max. While I was
I did. It's so good to see you, David.
Great. Later, we'll be joined by Kurt Wagner and Dana Hall to talk about X and Tesla, respectively. But first, we welcome Sarah McBride to the show. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
Sarah is Bloomberg's Neuralink reporter and will help guide us through this cerebral quantum leap. So, Sarah, what do we actually know here? What happened? A chip went in, the patient survived. What else do we know?
Well, in his tweet yesterday, Elon said that signals were working in the patient's brain, that neurons were firing, or words to that effect, which is great, but it would have been terrible news had that not been the case.
And what exactly does neurons firing, what is that for the lay people out there like me and Max? What does that mean?
In his post yesterday, Elon wrote that initial results showed promising neuron spike detection. And all that means is that there are 100 billion neurons almost in the average human brain. And so the neurons, which are the cells of the brain that are near this device, are working. When a neuron works, you can tell because it kind of activates at the end. There's a tiny electrical signal. So that's what they're picking up with the device as after it got implanted on Sunday.
That's pretty encouraging. I mean, hard to know exactly how much to read into it, but certainly positive for signs. The patient survived.
Right. Doesn't mean that the device is working. It means that it didn't destroy anything in the patient's brain, and probably a few days or weeks down the line, then they'll see if it can actually result in the patient being able to, for example, move a cursor on a computer outside their body.
Okay, so we don't know that yet. We're not there yet.
We don't know that yet.
Not even close.
Not even close.
I mean,
right.
Sorry, not to be the wet blanket, but I think we need to approach the claims being made here with some skepticism. First of all, it's Elon Musk we're talking about. He's a guy who tends to present, let's just say the rosiest possible version of any prospective technology. And this is a safety trial. It's not an efficacy trial. The point here is to put this in a few people's brains and see if anything bad happens to them. And so far, according to a single tweet by Elon Musk, we don't know, we haven't heard anything from the patient. We haven't heard anything else. Patient's doing okay. Just want to remind everyone, in the monkey trials that Neuralink did, there were a lot of serious complications for the monkeys. And I went back and reread the story that Wired published on this, right? These were not necessarily happening the next day. So I think there's still some time even before we can say these are safe, right?
So I was sort of thinking that the fact that here we are, TK hours later, the patient is still alive was fairly significant, that as a positive sign. Max is sort of suggesting that, well, okay, great, made it through the surgery, but these things tend to pop up down the road. Just how significant is initial survival? Obviously, again, great for the patient, but for the...
I have to say it's very significant. This has been years in the making. This has been Elon promising every year, oh yeah, we're going to have this device in a few months or next year. And finally, literally years after he first promised that, It is in a human brain. That said, other companies that have done similar work have tended to wait a few days before making similar
He's not. But this
So
is Elon Musk. You knew he wasn't going to wait.
this is Elon. Also, this patient is, monkeys can't indicate when there's something wrong. Monkeys try to scratch their heads and mess with the scar sites. I'm not saying that those surgeries weren't botched. I've read some of the UC Davis reports, and maybe there were mistakes made during the surgery, but this is a human patient, and hopefully a lot was learned from those monkey experiments. They've done many implants in primates since those botched ones. So I think they know the stakes here, and this one was super carefully done.
Now, on the surgery itself, it is not a human doing the surgery itself, right? It is a robot, correct?
There's a robot assisting in the surgery, but it's not like the patient goes in, the surgeons are like, okay, up to the robot, we're out of here. It's still a lot of humans in the operating room kind of managing the robot.
Okay. Well, that's reassuring that there are humans involved here. Now, listen, Max made it sound like this is all about the safety of the product and not so much about efficacy. But efficacy means when you were talking about whether this person will be able to move a cursor with his or her brain, that sounds like efficacy to me, not to safety. So
they definitely are interested in safety. That is, to Max's point, the top priority, but it's a little different to drug trials. So device trials don't go through the same phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 we might be familiar with from drugs. There are different stages, and they're analogous to some of those phase 1, 2, 3. But you don't put a device like this in somebody's brain and not know that it's working before you go ahead and implant the next patient. So,
but just to be clear, Sarah, there's another phase that they're going to need to market.
Oh, yeah, there are 2 more phases. We're looking at years of trials.
Right, and nonetheless, Elon Musk, in addition to announcing that the neurons are firing, or whatever he said, whatever that means, announced a product name for this. It's called Telepathy. It sounds wonderful. I mean, telepathy sounds like Star Trek.
It does sound pretty good.
Well, he's changed the name a few times, so let's see if telepathy sticks, but it's catchy.
Well, Max seems to like it, so there we go.
It's just funny how we've gone from, we put this in the guy is not dead yet, thank God. And it's called Telepathy. And, I feel like we're one tweet away from pre-order one now. It'll only be $1,000. It's a refundable deposit.
Put your deposit in.
I have a feeling it's not going to be called Telepathy when it finally gets released to the market. Somebody's going to put the kibosh on that. But yeah, it's a great name.
So what do stage 2, Sarah, and stage 3 look like? And when do we all go around with these things in our heads?
Elon said that he wanted to get it in over 10 patients this year, which is ambitious, but they could do it, if they did one a month. And then they have to analyze all the data, submit that to the FDA. Once the FDA's reviewed it, then they can start the next set of trials. And then the third set is called the pivotal trials. And those are the most exciting, that it's closest to an actual product. Those will be hundreds, if not thousands of people. But that's probably 5 years away.
Yeah.
If everything works as hoped.
Now, let me ask you this. You said in a good scenario, they're able to do about one a month. I guess I'm curious about that. What is it about these that are so difficult that you can only do one a month? Is it just simply the fact that these are just baby steps for them, and you have to be super cautious at this stage? I mean,
yeah, it's the first time they're doing this. You're putting electrodes several millimeters deep into somebody's cortex. You're slicing open their skull to do it. You're cutting into their dura. You want to make sure that the first one goes pretty well before you even try patient 2. Then you want to make sure patient 2 is doing pretty well before you try patient 3. And then you need to start actually doing the stuff you're trying to do, get the patient to move cursors and so on, control external devices. Then you have to build all that data, collate the results, present it to the FDA, let the FDA review it. And this is assuming that everything goes well. If you have a setback, like some patient whose scarring heals in a weird way, or that could delay everything by months more.
Sarah, listen, last question before we let you go here. So Neuralink in the Musk constellation of companies certainly isn't the most valuable, or I don't even think towards the top end of those. But this is a big step, right? Where roughly has it's a privately held company. Where has its valuation roughly been? And what, if anything, does this development do for that valuation?
Yeah, I mean, it'll probably increase the valuation. And as to where it is in the constellation of Musk companies, it's toward the bottom. But toward the bottom for a Musk company, in this case, Neuralink's worth $3.5 billion. For a medical device company that just implanted its first device in a human, that is huge, just unbelievable. So that's the Musk effect driving up the valuation. And then, if they make it to the next trial, it'll have another outsized jump that'll make every other medical device company jealous. And you're seeing it already. I saw the CEO of a rival company called Synchron last night. I just think he couldn't help himself. He had to post a tweet of one of his patients manipulating Pong with his mind, just like, we're still here, don't forget about us, we've got devices and patients too.
Still there, and in many ways, as you've reported many times, in many ways, many steps ahead of Neuralink, actually, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in some ways, they're in patients, but in other ways, their device isn't as sophisticated as the Neuralink device. Neuralink has 1,000 electrodes, more than 1,000 on its device, and Synchron doesn't have that many. So you can go back and forth and debate the pros and cons. But yeah, they were in patients well before Neuralink.
And they're way behind on names because, because a normal sober-minded medical device company would not just go around marketing a highly speculative brand name on their, very much in development. Maybe it works, maybe it's safe, we don't know yet product. But Elon, he'll go ahead and do that. And and investors, for better or worse, they like that.
They love it.
Okay. Sarah, listen, thank you very much for being with us. We will have you on as soon as we know more, as soon as you know more about our first patient here.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Max and I are now joined by Kurt Wagner, a tech reporter here at Bloomberg covering social media and the author of the soon-to-be-released book, Battle for the Bird, about Twitter and the battle for control of the company. Kurt, I know there's something about Taylor Swift and deepfake porn, and then Musk's people came back and they hit the nuclear option, and you suddenly couldn't search at all for her. What the heck happened?
Yeah, I mean, you had all the ingredients right there of exactly what happened. So the end of last week, we saw that there was deepfake porn of arguably the most famous woman in the world right now, Taylor Swift, circulating on X. And this violates several of the company's policies, first and foremost. And so what we saw was naturally people seeking it out, sharing it, commenting on it, outrage, of course, from Swifties and other fans of not only Taylor, but just people who realize that this is not a good thing to be happening on any platform. And then you saw the companies sort of scrambling to try and figure out what to do about this, right? And David, you mentioned they ultimately, for a couple days, literally blocked people from having search results when they searched for Taylor Swift's name. It's sort of happy to get into sort of how extreme that is.
Right. Why did they take such an extreme step? Why could they not be more precise in their crackdown on this?
So you do something like this when you're having trouble cleaning up all of the stuff on your own, right? This is I would consider a last resort or close to a last resort. And to me, the fact that they simply had to block people from even searching for Taylor Swift is a sign that they were not able to get the problem under control on their own. And so they had to take a drastic measure like this. I've covered Twitter for 10 years. I don't remember this happening before in terms of the search ban, certainly not as it relates to a high-profile user like this.
And that tells you what, then, about the current state of X?
Well, that the trust and safety function over there is not operating in the way that it was before Elon took over, and that it's not operating very smoothly, right? I mean, presumably, how something like this would normally be handled is it would be flagged to the company, oftentimes maybe even by not Taylor directly, but probably her team, right? They'd have a partnerships contact at the company that they would go to. The company would not only immediately take down the original tweet, but they would probably take those photos or videos and start to scan the rest of the service for either identical matches to them or other photos or videos that look very similar. Maybe it's the same photo, but a watermark has been added or something like that, right? And they would sort of automate the process of taking the stuff down as quickly as possible. What we know is that the original content was up, I believe, for something like 17 hours.
It's now down.
The
original content is now down.
It's now down. That's right. And to be clear, starting last night, so Monday night, they started letting people search for Taylor Swift again. So they feel like they've gotten the process the problem under control, but it took several days.
On that, you mentioned the NFL game. The NFL game is, as all of basically mankind knows, Taylor Swift is dating the tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs, Travis Kelce. The Kansas City Chiefs played on Sunday in the semifinals of the NFL playoffs. They won. They're going to the Super Bowl. So this ban, though, on Taylor Swift searches is happening as this playoff game, this Kansas City Chiefs game is going on. And Kurt, the NFL has been, right, one of the few bright spots for X of late in terms of generating buzz and content and all that. Horrible timing, no?
Terrible timing. I mean, imagine how many people are watching that game Sunday and see, CBS cutaway to a shot of Taylor Swift jumping around in the Kelce box or whatever, and want to go to X and search about it or to talk about it or whatever, right? And suddenly a huge part of the service is not working for that exact use case.
Kurt, so the nuclear option, somebody there at X hit the button. There was a very, very large button that just says nuke, and they hit it, and Taylor Swift disappeared from X for basically a day. Is that what we're going to expect going forward? Is that the blueprint then as this comes up in coming days and weeks, including perhaps during the Super Bowl in 2 weeks?
I mean, that can't be the long-term blueprint, right? That's just not a good strategy. It's not a good business model. It's a bad way to handle this, but it's what you do when you're desperate. So my hope is that there were a lot of learnings from the past couple days, that the team that is there figured out, okay, here's what we did wrong, or maybe add some new level of kind of monitoring for some high profile accounts. As you mentioned, the Super Bowl is 2 weeks from now. If this stuff starts to circulate again, like, will they have made enough of a change in the next 2 weeks? I'd be surprised. So it may be that we see something like this happen again. What I will point out real quick is that they did say, and they're announcing this very intentionally this week, they're going to open a trust and safety office in Austin, Texas. They claim they're going to hire 100 full-time employees now 100 is a small amount, to be clear, but full-time employees at X, 100 is actually a pretty decent size. And they're announcing this because Linda Yaccarino is going to be speaking before Congress on Wednesday about protecting children online.
Is it actually meaningful, or is it just simply PR and spin before this appearance?
I think it's more PR than it is meaningful.
Well, what would a reasonable number be for a task like that, Kurt?
Well, it's tough because so many of these companies, like Meta, I think, was touting tens of thousands of content moderators, but most of them are contractors, right? They're like basically just sifting through this never-ending wheel of terrible content and clicking allow or not allow or whatever. Having 100 full-time employees working on this could be meaningful if those people are, writing policy, handling high-profile accounts like Taylor Swift. I need to see what these people's jobs description are going to be before I can really say how meaningful it is.
But what if you are a much lesser public personality and do not have the influence or the deep pockets that Taylor Swift has if you too are targeted in something like this? What is your fate?
I think you're in trouble in that situation, quite frankly. I mean, if it takes 17 hours and several days to figure this out for Taylor Swift, what chance does someone who has 100 followers or maybe someone who's not even on X, right? But yet their face or their content or their body has been posted to X, right? They might not even really be aware that it's up there. This is not just an X problem, so I don't want to continue. We're talking about X because of the situation over the last couple of days, but like this idea of women in particular having their bodies shared online without their consent, like this happens on websites all over the place, and it's not okay, right? But you just hold a higher standard to some of these larger companies because they have so much power, so much money, so much influence. You hope that the Metas and the X's of the world can get this right, because if they can't get it right, what kind of hope do we have for anybody?
Yeah, we should say there's been reporting suggesting this was a Microsoft tool that was used to create this, or at least create some of these images. There have been Google Alphabet has had its own battles with basically celebrity deepfakes. So yeah, I mean, a lot of big companies that have, gigantic, vast teams of people, you would think trying to stop this stuff have also struggled, but they just haven't struggled in such a spectacularly comic way. The banning of Taylor Swift. Also, the risk isn't just like getting sued by Taylor Swift. It's like upsetting your users. I don't know if other people have noticed this, but like sometimes you're just searching for something on Twitter and there will just be like porn that'll just like find its way that has found its way past the filters and into your feed. Like it's very, and again, when you're talking about like the Taylor Swift fandom, probably don't have to tell people feel very strongly about it. Like, I don't think they want to see, normal people don't want to see Taylor Swift revenge porn. And that might be enough to turn, large numbers of people off of X permanently.
And advertisers, Max, right? Like we could have a hour-long conversation about advertisers fleeing X and Elon, but this type of thing does not help them at all, because Coca-Cola, Apple, Disney, pick your brand. The last thing they want to do is be handing over their money to a platform that is, known for Taylor Swift deepfake.
Right. Well,
it's quite the advertising deck. It's like Linda on Madison Avenue being like, listen, we've got some great products for you. We've got the NFL. We've got deepfake porn on one side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kurt, we will see how they do in 2 weeks when the Kansas City Chiefs, Travis Kelce, and Taylor Swift take on the San Francisco 49ers, and we'll see how X holds up then. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
We are now joined by our ace Tesla reporter, Dana Hull. Hello, Dana.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so last week, and we previewed this on the show, Tesla released fourth quarter earnings, and the market gave it, I said earlier, thumbs down. I actually think they gave it 2 thumbs down. The stock cratered towards the end of last week. Actually, in all of the S&P 500 index, there are only 2 companies year to date that have fallen more than Tesla, and they are 2 companies mired in major crises. I know the stock is bouncing back some now, but still, it seems like this was a flop. Dana, tell us, why did it fall so much? Was it something that was actually in the earnings report, or was it something that was said that unnerved investors so much?
Well, it was both. The January earnings call is all about forward-looking guidance, and this was a company that did not really give any guidance. They just said that things were going to be lower and that they're in between 2 waves of growth.
Tesla is currently between 2 major growth waves. We're focused on making sure that our next growth wave, driven by next-gen vehicle, energy storage, full self-driving, and other projects, is executed as well as possible.
And, there was not a number, like how many cars are they going to deliver in 2024? They didn't say 2 million. They didn't say 2.5 million. They just said that growth could be lower and that they're in between 2 waves. And that was sort of unnerving. And then as the call went on, like things just sort of, Elon was very like sunny and optimistic and upbeat in terms of his tone, but the lack of guidance was really disturbing. And the stock is now down 22% so far in 2024.
Max, my take is, as I was looking at this briefly, was that you have a company in Tesla that has long been this great growth stock, right? All stocks, investors see stocks in 2 categories. They're a growth stock or a value stock. And a growth stock is a stock that you are buying in anticipation of great growth going forward. In the last few years, around 60% a year. That is slowed to 20%. And that seems to be roughly what people are forecasting going forward. So I guess, when you're valued as much as it was, $800 billion at one point, not too recently, I guess this is just sort of like a gravity moment here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, and Elon himself kind of said that, he sort of in attempting, as Dana says, to kind of lower expectations said, at a certain point, the growth's going to, the law of large numbers comes in and you can't grow 50% a year. I think that it's part of what's going on here is it's not just that Elon Musk is giving these predictions or non-predictions that are dour, but when he's trying to tell the growth story, it's getting harder and harder to kind of conceptualize. Like during the call, he talked about Optimus, the Tesla robot, as this kind of be-all, end-all. He said it was going to be the most valuable product of all time. And on the call itself, you had one of Elon's own employees kind of jumping in and saying, well, the big problem is for now, we can't figure out anything to do with Optimus. So there's kind of this gap between Elon's version of what the company is and the kind of Wall Street version of the company.
Do we believe that employee is still employed at Tesla?
It did not sound good because there was, when you're getting into an argument with the boss on the call, it's
there's a pretty big gap between the greatest product of all time and we have no idea what to do with this thing.
I think what's really interesting is that, so Tesla fundamentally is a car company. Most of their revenue comes from cars. However, they don't really have a car right now. Like the Cybertruck is barely in production. I mean, the Y is this bestseller, but the Y is getting old. So you're not going to see this big wave of growth until they come out with their next generation platform, which they basically said would be late 2025, maybe. So in the meantime, what do you tell Wall Street about? You talk about, we're an AI company. We're a robotics company. Right. We've got this Optimus robot. We've got this Dojo computer, which is now a long shot. We have an energy business. So they have to talk about their other products because the core automotive product is just they barely talked about the Cybertruck on the call at all. I mean, it was a huge omission.
But having said that, I do see on my Tesla earnings bingo card here, the Cybertruck box was ticked. And I want to talk about this bingo card. I missed this last week. I didn't play. I'm a little disappointed. But it seems like that we came close to getting bingo, but came up short here. Is that right? We couldn't quite pull it off.
No. And I will say that Elon Musk's, frantic, citing all the future products, trying to come up with some kind of growth story was gold for bingo because we had Dojo, we had Optimus, we had, demand for Teslas are unlimited. This was good for bingo, but there was a...
Bad for the stock. Good for bingo, bad for the stock, which has been a hypothesis of mine for many years.
There are hedge funds all over building models that, correlate.
But I'll also say this, and I don't know, Dan, if you played a hand in formulating this bingo card here, I feel like it was slightly rigged for us not to get it. I mean, audibly Puff's joint was only put on the card to block. There was no chance he was going to audibly puff a joint. No. Hold on. Also, digging our own grave. I mean, those are the two that blocked you guys hitting bingo. He wasn't going to repeat digging our own grave. You guys rigged this thing. It was rigged.
No, he repeats himself all the time. I mean, that's the thing about Elon. It's as our former colleague Sean O'Kane used to say, he's like a comedian practicing his bit. He says a lot of stock phrases over and over and over again.
But I want to direct your attention to, I believe it's N5. Right. Production is hard, which is something that Elon Musk has reiterated over and over and over again recently. And he very easily could have said that on the on this call. You don't need audibly Puff's joint. And I want to remind you, audibly Puff's joint was realistic.
All right, I regret to... First of all, can you give me my bingo card back? All right, let's end it there. Thank you for listening to Elon Inc. And thanks to Dana and Max.
Great to be here.
Always a pleasure.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Naomi Shavin and Rehan Harmansi are our senior editors. The idea for this very show also came from Rehan. Lake Maples handles engineering, and we get special editing assistance from Jeff Grocott. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. Huge thanks to Angel Rosillo and Joel Weber. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcast and our executive producer. I am David Papadopoulos. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. See you next week.